Okay, recording has started. So, hello everybody. This is we didn't pick a name for this podcast, but I was thinking, Tim, that it would be um quarterly, or we might want to do it monthly depending on how often you think we should, given the
Circumstances.
circumstances and how quickly things are changing. So, you let me know if you want to do monthly, quarterly, but quarterly calls with public lands warrior Tim Shamber. That's what I.
I yeah, it should probably include all of us,
I
maybe
know.
to some degree. Yeah,
All right. Well, we'll come up with the title then. But
yeah.
so
I
everyone,
don't know if I see myself as a land lawyer, but I
you
could become one
you
very
are going to
quickly.
become one. So that's why we're doing this. So
Well, you're probably one of the people that we know that uses public lands the most.
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. And enjoys outdoors and outdoor living. So
and also is passionate about it. So
Yeah.
and knows a lot.
Yeah, uh, I only have X amount of time left in this world, but my grandkids have a lot of time, so it's all about them.
there you go. Awesome.
All right. So I just introduce you real quick. Do you want me to give your last name or just first name?
No, last name's fine.
Okay. So this is Tim Shamber joining us today, and he will be on every public lands podcast that we do. Tim has been throughout my life a great mentor. He took a chance on me and hired me on as a seasonal fisheries technician for Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. How long ago now, Tim? I don't know, a while, right?
Ooh, yeah, it's
It's been a while, but he took a chance
yeah.
on me, and I remember I had no fish hatchery experience, but during my interview, I talked a lot about taking care of my goldfish as a child, and Tim still hired me, regardless of that. And then he
I
also
think the question was, did they survive?
yes, the goldfish. Well, no, did die eventually. Did die eventually, but
As we all do.
yeah, Tim just invested in me and got me on other seasonal positions so that I could get my time in to be able to apply for permanent positions and just help me along and really guided my whole career with fish and wildlife ever since he hired me on. That's been my career. He not only hired me on, he, like I said, he invested in me. He put me through leadership trainings and allowed me to do different opportunities that came up, like when I wanted to go to Alaska and help U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with Steller's eiders. He was like, yes, go for it, go for it. And every step of the way, he just had my back. And one of the biggest times he had my back was when there was a huge fish killed. I don't know, Tim, do you remember how many fish died? It was a lot, right?
Yeah, a couple 100,000.
Couple 100,000 on my watch, and yeah, he had me. I had my back through that, and that was a tough time. So yeah, I can't thank him enough for everything he's done in my life, and he always worked alongside of us, the technicians, just as hard. He wasn't an office boss. He was right next to us doing all the hard work, and he's a man of great integrity. He's honest, and yeah, he's been one of my most treasured mentors, and he's been a friend and has become family. And I love you, Tim. So thanks
I
for.
hope you're going to make me cry before we get started.
And a couple of weeks ago, Tim checked in just to see how I was doing, and almost immediately, it was pretty funny, right? We just started talking about both of our concerns about public lands, and Tim mentioned that he wished he could do something. So said, here we go, let's do a podcast. And so this is our first podcast. And Tim, why don't you tell everyone why you love public lands?
Well, I'm a native Oregonian, and we lived on ranch land, but public lands were very close and accessible. And we would commonly go on camping trips on the weekends, fishing trips on the weekends. And I've just carried that out throughout my life. Just the ability to have someplace to go that in essence is yours to utilize. And in Oregon, we're blessed. We're about, I don't know, close to 51% public lands.
Mhm.
And so you don't have to go far to find it. And just the ability to go out and recreate at low cost, take your family out there, camp. It's a total different setting than if you're just going to state parks where you're camped next to somebody and it's like living in a neighborhood. To go out on public lands like National Forest or BLM and just dry camp or camp by lakes, whatever, where it's just you and nature. And so just to be able to utilize that, I raised my family doing it. And now I have grandkids. And never in most of my adult life did I ever feel like our public lands were really threatened with being dissolved and no longer being public lands, or the transferring of those lands maybe to states that may not care for them. And so that's where I'm at now, is that I now see that as a issue. I can see the potential of that happening.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, there's already been some land sales as far as I know, I heard recently. So, what do you know about this? I heard that public land, what they want to sell, Secretary Burgum and is it Department of Housing and
Yes.
something, yeah, and development. They're talking about only public lands around like urban areas, cities and whatnot. And I know that BLM just sold some land around Las Vegas, that they had little plots of land that were between houses. How do you feel about that? And have you heard of any other sales so far?
I haven't. And I think in general, there may be certain plots of public land that fall like within an area where, yeah, it may make sense to open that up for additional housing. But some of the lands that they're talking about they're not really in an area that public housing hasn't utilized all of its private lands, is what I've been reading.
Okay.
And so again, it's a slippery slope. And in an administration where you may not have the trust that they have the best interest of public lands at heart, is that opening the door for ceding additional lands and for other purposes, oil, gas, exploration, mining, that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's, again, that's something to be honest, it was kind of awakening when the Trump administration had begun just cutting our land management agencies of all their staffing. It become like a very predictable thing for me to see. Well, if you don't have the staff to manage the lands, then what's the next step?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what kind of woken me up. And then I realized just how ignorant I was of moves by various states that have already been in place to try to take our federal public lands back and put them to the states. Utah being a big case that was just recently went to court. So
I was curious about that too, because I heard, I don't know what I was reading, but something where certain states like Montana, like Zinke and another senator both say, no way, we're not selling our public lands.
Yeah.
So is that how it works? Is that each state can really determine whether they're going to play that game. And it's the states that are like Utah, Nevada, that really the states want more control of the public lands. You know, or I don't know how much state involvement is in the decision-making process with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think any land transfers that actually occur would end up having to go through legislation.
Yeah.
I mean, and so ultimately, but it was this, the states are beginning to challenge it in the courts. And Utah's case was, they said that they have 18.1 million acres of, or 18.5 million acres of federal lands within their state, and that it's unconstitutional for the federal government to just be holding those lands, and that it should belong to the state that the lands fall within. And so they filed a lawsuit with the Supreme Court. What's interesting is there was 13 states that also supported that lawsuit. And so a lot of those states, some of them back east, when you look at their percentage of public lands, it's 0.34%.
Yeah.
Texas at 1.5%, something like that.
Yeah.
So you have to think it's more than just who's managed the lands. It's almost a political, and the fact that, you know, I don't want to, public lands involve both, regardless of the party you're on. But all of these lawsuits have been led by Republican legislatures. And so, but anyway, long story short, the Supreme Court refused to hear the case. They just said there wasn't a case to be made for that. So again, our courts, which are our third branch of government, and right now in many cases, I don't want to get off our discussion here, but
no, I mean, we're going to talk about everything.
Yeah,
Go where you
it's it's our court system that's the only leg of our government that is really functioning to support the Constitution right now, because our executive branch is doing everything it can to challenge it, the Constitution, in every way, and we have a Republican-led majority in the legislature that is basically being silent about it. And so the court system is the only thing that we have going right now that's our check and balance part. And
John
so
was talking this morning though about concerns about the court. You want to share what you were talking about with me?
Oh, well, I know that 500, the lower Supreme Courts for the states, basically that's what they're trying to, the Republicans now are trying to essentially make them mute, and then everything has to go through the Supreme Court, so that the lower judicial courts from the states can't hold up against the executive branch. It's just interesting that these are supposed constitutionalists, and the way that the Constitution's written, there's three separate branches that are supposed
exactly
to go against one another, right? So
yeah, I
go
heard
against
about
one
that.
another, but be
Balance
and
each other.
check,
Yeah.
checks and balances
Yeah.
for one another. So
Yeah, again, it's our legislative branch, instead of supporting that Constitution, seems to be, at this point in time, actually doing everything they can to allow the executive branch to have ultimate power. And I don't know, it's just, I hear a lot of people screaming about the economy right now, but the sirens have been going off in my head immediately in this administration because of the attacks against the Constitution that our legislative branch isn't putting any checks on that. So yeah, I don't know where this goes, but
you brought up a good point, and I read recently in a book that public lands not too long ago was something that everybody agreed upon. Like everybody, like almost everybody wanted to protect, like the public wanted to protect our public lands. And it's just more recent with the greater divide that people are starting to fight over this too. And it would be nice if everybody could get back together in support of our wild spaces, because I think it's something all of our souls need. A place
Well,
of quiet, and a place to remember our size in the world, and like, just, yeah, just.
absolutely. And you asked me the question, why is it I feel strongly about public lands? And I didn't get into that part of it, but when I'm out there, that those are definitely there. I mean, some people will look at, let's go out to Wyoming, let's say, in that open sagebrush land, and some people look at it, call it a desert.
Yep.
But you go up on a little knoll, sit down with binoculars, and just sit there for 2, 3 hours and watch what goes on. And you realize then how much life there is that's going on out there.
Mhm.
And so it's just taking the time to see it, like you say, to have time to think, to get away where it's quiet, and plus this earth needs those kind of places to heal,
Mhm.
and it's like we should be doing the opposite. We should be trying to create more of that than take away from it.
Yeah.
So
The issue with it, I think, really is that there's a certain percentage of the population that doesn't even see it for what it is or hasn't been there. Some people are city dwellers, right? They're motivated by money. So that comes with the fracking, with oil, gas, all of that. So all of they see in that space where you're sitting on a knoll and seeing these wonderful creatures and just nature in front of you, and they're looking at it with what's underneath all of that. How can we make money? How can I get a new house or a new car? It's you're dealing with people that are very diametrically opposed, essentially.
yeah, they see the, so to speak, they see the forest only for the trees,
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
and not what's in the forest.
Right.
And yeah, you jogged something in my mind. Well, I know lots of people that use public lands, and they're a lot of them are probably like I was just a couple of 3, 4 months ago. Uh, and I'll call myself ignorant of things that were taking place to try to take away federal public lands that I didn't know were in place and
Mhm.
happening until just recently. And I think that it's true for them. They're just not aware. And so, one of the things I did was like, well, then I need to know more. I need to know, how do I have this information brought to my attention so I can stay on top of what's going on. I've written the two senators from here and asking for, how do I stay abreast of those kind of things. The other thing I've done was look up various, uh, not agencies, but groups that are um,
Like nonprofits.
nonprofits, such as the Wildlife Foundation, Wildlife Heritage Foundation, the Sierra Club.
Mhm.
There's a whole list of them where you can go on their website and get the updated news of what's happening. They're very much on top of whatever legislation is going on. But I think just, and maybe, if there's any success out of what we're doing right here,
Mhm.
it's just normal people that enjoy the outdoors and enjoy our public lands talking and discussing about this. And if anybody watches, uh, if we can put information into this that either brings it to their attention, brings directs them to somewhere they can go to stay on top for themselves, because a lot of them I know would fight to the death to keep public lands. They just need to be made aware that there is an attack on public lands.
Mhm.
So
Yep. Did your senators respond to you?
I did get a response from Wyden,
Okay.
but it was a general response that at this time they're getting so much input from the public over various things that happen. my input response or my input was of a specific nature, and that they will get back to me, but it'll take some time. So we'll see. And
Okay.
it was just recent. It was only like 4 days ago that I did that. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just recently read this book, Leave It As It Is, David, I don't know how you say his name, Gessner, A Journey Through Theodore Roosevelt's American Wilderness. Tim, you would like this. A lot of history,
yeah, I'm gonna
how,
I'll
it
have to get
started.
that book.
How, because he was really our pioneer for public lands, Theodore Roosevelt. But in the back, the author put some, just some quotes from people he talked to about public lands. And this was something I hadn't thought about, but he said, my worst fear truly is that those lands will become private. We can deal with oil and gas exploration. An oil well will come in. If we're careful with it, it's going to do some damage, but it will be gone in 20 years. And we can smooth that well pad over and pick up the pipelines. But if we lose it from public ownership and it becomes someone's private property, we'll never see that again. We're seeing a greater division between those who have and those who have not. And public lands, the public places, are shared places for all of us to share and enjoy. If we lose those things, we've really lost much of the value of these wild places. And that was from Kevin Jones, who was a former Utah State archaeologist. And when we talked, Tim, when we talked about doing this, I remember you focusing on the privatization of public lands. And like a lot of the thoughts that I had initially was all the mining and oil and gas, and how they're, like during the last administration, they were trying to decrease Bears Ears National Monument and Escalante, the Grand Staircase, and that the maps had basically followed where the oil and gas, like the map to cut out the sections of those parks, basically overlap the oil and gas and mining maps. And I always worry about that, and I do, because I don't think that corporations are held accountable for the cleanup after they come in and damage it. It's again the American public. But like you brought up to me, I think the losing the public lands, we don't get those back. And that's really the most important fight in my mind right now.
Yeah, well said. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. I mean, recover from a lot of things, but once this is gone, it's gone. And there's various ways I can see it going too. It's taking all the resources off of it and then just saying, federal government saying, we don't want to manage it anymore. They've reduced the agencies.
Yep.
And so sell it or give it to the states. And the states don't have there's a couple things I see is states, it's not going to come with money to manage it. So is a state really going to take on all this acreage of public lands and have to manage it? Or are they going to try to get what they can from it? And so some people would say, well, I'd rather maybe have my state manage those lands. But if you look at the history of state land ownership, it's not a history of where it's 100% protected, And so, I mean, just recently, I can't remember the name of the Oregon legislature representative, Central Oregon, but they've introduced a bill to attempt to lease the Ochakos district lands for 15 years from the federal government. And they're saying because the federal government hasn't done this, that, and the other thing to manage these lands, and our state forestry department can do a better job of it.
Okay.
So again, that kind of thing would take a congressional act to do that. But that's a state representative trying to introduce a bill to get the state to acquire that ability.
Do you know how Oregon leans, like your representatives, towards protecting federal lands versus?
Well, we have a Democrat majority
Mm-hmm.
in our state legislature.
Yep.
So as a whole, we would lean toward federal protection, federal public lands.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's going to be the certain individuals that would like to drive it the other way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I guess one of the concerning things I see is I'll call it alternative world that they build it up on of the Forest Service not doing this, that, and the other thing. And the thing is a lot of times those are false narratives. You know, they are doing slash burning. They are doing road maintenance, and they are taking a lot of this is about road access. Some of the roads are being set aside for various wildlife protections and things, and so they make it seem as if the federal government isn't managing their particular lands within their states, and that's just not the case.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like so many other things I've seen in this administration where they say something, they create this vision of what as they see the world. I don't know whether they really do, but it's a false narrative. You know, it's not like what's really true if you look at everything objectively. So
yeah,
they portray a dystopian landscape, and they're the only people that can bring everybody out of it. Right? That's how it seems like it's being fed to the common people.
And the powers to be right now in Washington that are probably even in the upper level are been appointed by our land management agencies. I would ask, have they ever spent the night in a tent under the stars, dry camping out somewhere in the remote areas of our public lands? Have they ever experienced that? And until you have, I don't know how you can be a spokesperson for an agency that's supposed to, its mission is to protect those lands. So
well said.
Yeah.
I don't think that anyone who wants to support lands have really spent any time out there. So yeah, I agree.
So
it's a resource. Essentially, they're using it as a monetary. They see it as a monetary resource. Some people would never set foot to camp outside. They're just not built that way. But in the same respect, I guess what really bothers me about the whole thing is the way that everything would be left if they were going to lease these lands. And besides, obviously, open pit mining, if you could extract oil and have it be a clean process, have these corporations have some kind of real legal binding, what's the word I'm looking for?
In perpetuity, where
yes, yes, exactly. Yeah. If they do something wrong, they can't just walk away from it. And they made literally millions of dollars, and they have to pay $100,000 fine. And now you have a toxic environment that's left behind. So it's all about profit and greed. With it seems to be, at least with the corporations going in and using these the public lands. And that's what really scares me, is how is it going to be left if it really goes through this way? I mean,
okay, we're good.
There's got to be culpability for these large corporations. That's the issue. I mean, I understand we need infrastructure on some level, and right, the administration basically said that they want energy independence. The United States have energy independence. So, I mean, I understand that. I just feel, well, I should say, their track record has left something to be desired of that cleanup, or the way that these lands are left. I'm not a huge fan of strip mining or mining in general, but I understand that you can't just stop, like with the electric cars, for instance. You can't just all of a sudden have everybody using electric cars till the technology gets better. So, and then there's issues with the batteries. So there's no one size fits all here. So you do need a little bit of use of the resources, but managed with some integrity.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, and I totally agree. Uh, and now we're saddled with a bigger issue of where they want to um, take away some of the environmental protection policies that have been in place that haven't been foolproof for protecting the environment, but have at least been some benefit. And it's almost like we're we want to remove those and go back what we were like 30 years ago. I mean, a good,
makes no
good example is the Willamette River. You know, you used to not be able to swim in the Willamette River.
Mhm.
And because of various environmental policies that have come on, the river is now there. I mean, there's the lower part that has some issues
Yeah.
uh, down in the shipbuilding areas and stuff. But as far as the river from, let's say, Oregon's, downtown Portland and up, it's very usable river now. And that couldn't be said 40 years ago. So those policies, people have to think, yeah, they might cost corporate America something, but they've given us something. And we have to, before we just throw out all these things, these policies, we have to ask ourselves, why were they in place to begin with? What brought us to the point of putting these policies in place? And we would find that the reasons is our health was involved, maybe, or it was killing off wildlife. I mean, there's reasons these policies exist. And for an administration to just say, it's hurting the corporate world.
Bottom line, the bottom
Yeah,
line.
bottom line, to have to have these policies in place, that should raise red flags for a lot of people. We have an administration that says they want a healthier America. Let's, we're going to clean up our food supply and all of that. But at the same time, they're going to take away environmental policies. I mean, you can't do both. You can't have a world where policies that are there in place to help provide for a cleaner environment and then say our goal is to have a healthier food source for people to live. I mean, it's all connected. So
It doesn't make any sense that, like, RFK is a champion for the environment, right? And now he's doing the Maha Make America Healthy Again stuff. But it's like, and I guess that's the compromise, right? And that's what I'm trying to come up. That's what I was trying to express before, is that we do need to use resources, but we have to do it. Uh, I mean, to not to sound hippy dippy, but in a kinder and gentler way to the environment and to the people around us.
yep.
You can't go and, I mean, I grew up, my grandparents lived in the Passaic River, which runs down in Bergen County. It's a very industrialized area of New Jersey. And I'm 50 now, and I remember being 5 or 6 and seeing the waste coming out of the factories. They used to just dump right into the river. I mean, that was just common practice. So where did these environmental laws, just like you said, where did these environmental laws come from? They came from a concern for people's health, for the future. And you're talking about your grandkids. Okay, so we go in and we strip mine and we make America independently, or the United States independently. Our oil and gas is independent, but at what cost? So it's yes, it's
Yeah,
I could
Tim,
get on my so I'll get off my
we
soapbox.
talked a little bit just about when we talked a couple weeks ago, Tim, about that very concern is that like history repeating itself. We almost like you like history and you see like it almost like we have to relearn all our lessons again, right? It's like the country's gotten so far to a point of let us do everything we want, just like after the depression, and let's just develop. And there's everything's endless again. We can take, and then we have to relearn the lesson. So all these environmental laws get stripped down, and then all of a sudden you have a bunch of people dying of cancer from drinking tainted water. And then it's just like when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring and that movement started in that direction. It's almost like we're getting to this breaking point again where we have to go through all of that again and be in worse shape with the amount of pollutants and everything into our bodies and the repercussions from that before we go, oh yeah, this is why we did that, right? And it's like
Exactly. I it, it's so,
yeah,
that's why, and like we say, we've been hit with a lot over the last 3 months,
yeah,
and I don't want to diverse from the core of our project here,
Yeah,
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 but it touches on everything else, and that is I almost see our country, I'll use an analogy, as teenagers that have parents that are trying to tell them what's coming up in their life based on their knowledge, and the teenagers don't have ears to hear it. They just don't. And so they will be left to live their life, learn those same things over again, go through some of the hardships that had they listened, they could probably skip around.
mm-hmm.
Our country right now is that teenager, and we have parents, and it's called history. And you could go as far back to Germany, but more relevant, you could go to Hungary, and you can look at Turkey right now. And what you could look at Turkey and say 20 years ago, what did Turkey start doing that led to authoritarian person who's been in place for 20 years and has created a country where if you attend a university and you write any paper or anything that's, they have their appointed government people on boards, on the university boards, and you write an opposing paper to the government, you don't get your diploma. And if you finally have a party that has a true public figure who's well thought of by the nation and is a threat to being elected and finally having a true democracy, they're arrested. So people don't realize we're heading down that path. We could look there and say, that's our parents telling us if we go down this track, this is what we're going to end up with. And right now you have people in Turkey who are revolting. They're having protests now over that. Well, do we want to go through that 20 years and then have to have those protests and have to have a small revolution to get our democracy back? Why do we want to live that? And yet I see a legislature, our legislative branch, if not even more than allowing to happen, it's trying to set it up, like you said, take away the lower courts' ability to be our check and balance. I see them actually allowing this to take place. So, and it won't be, Trump's too old to be that authoritarian person. He can't stay in power that long. Age is, gets us all. But a party could.
Yeah.
And so that's the concerns I have in all of this. But we have a right to protest and speak up about our public lands and that we don't want them. But if we get too far down this road the way it's going, we may not have any avenue to fight
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
Well, anybody that says anything against this, the administration that's in now, and it almost seems that they're discounted, or we are moving in that direction. And I I you have what I would consider insanity on both ends of the spectrum here, the far left and the far right. And it just so happens that more of the far right is in right now. It's very, very scary. It just seems that there aren't that many moderates, or the voice of the moderates is not out there to be heard. So it's just making the people in the United States very separate, and we're not working towards a future of the same goals for future generations, like your grandchildren. It seems like
Yeah, I
it's
think
very much in the right now. What can we get right now at this, in this instance? And
Yeah, I totally agree. I've up until, I don't know, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, I was registered Republican, but I was probably pretty much close to being independent, pretty much. I'm kind of pretty moderate in that. But I've changed to actually registered Democrat. And the reason why is not that they have all the answers, but sometimes they're willing to take the progressive steps to, as far as environment and moving toward electric cars and things like that, green energy, to take those steps that we have to take and learn from those mistakes in order to get where we need to be. And the Republican Party just wasn't giving me that. And it's not like I'm voting for myself anymore. I'm voting for my grandkids. What kind of a world do I think, what government entities can support them in having a better world to live in, a cleaner world to live in? And so that's why I've kind of moved to the left on some of these things. But I think I always try on everything I look at, I try to look at it from different angles, hear the other person's side of it, and I try to be objective. I try to think, man, what am I missing here? It seems like a lot of people are supporting what's occurring here, and what am I missing? And so I I think I'm being objective in my views, but again, um, I have my I have my own personal
yeah, values and
values and
an
morals.
we
experience.
have
And
Yep.
yes, yeah.
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 Yeah, it was
But
interesting. John and I were driving, maybe it was yesterday or maybe it was even this morning. Um, and talking a little bit about politics, and just John said something like, back when we were growing up, people cared about feeding the world, like we
yes,
don't have those types of like we're and like that's the type of thing is like, yeah, people cared about like other people in the world and doing better.
More
It's like
community. It
we're
was
not,
more community
yeah,
based.
yeah,
like it feels like we're moving away from that. And like that's what is hoping is that around public lands, like everybody can get behind that. Because I mean, even like Nixon said in the book I read, like, he's a Republican, and what did he say? He called wilderness the breathing room of the nation. I mean,
yeah,
that's what we need. We need space. We need, like you said, big swaths of land to maintain the wildlife species that depends on it, to have clean water, places that can filter all the pollutants we're putting into these things, yeah. And we also, for our general well-being, we need places where, I mean, we come from hunter gatherers, from like where we could look out upon land and give us a sense of peace, when we're always going in front of the television screens, and the society we're living in now, where everything coming at us. at least from what I hear around, like, right now being at my parents' house, listening to the news, like the stuff we're getting fed is not bringing us peace, and it's not creating a better community. But when you go out on the land, it gives you that perspective again. It calms you down. It shakes off the layers of all the external input that's coming in, that's making you kind of angst, and maybe making you not like that person or this. When you get out into the peace of the wilderness, you start to realize who you are again. And in the core of most human beings, we're good, and we want
Yeah.
to be good, and like that's what I'm hoping that public lands, if we can rally people around that, like that's a good thing. And it's interesting today, I know the Sierra Club, I don't know if they started it, but they're having rallies, is that what you call them, rallies all across the country, telling the administration, like, hands off, just hands off our public lands, hands off this stuff. I don't know how it's going to do, but we all have to do something. And in a way, I hope we can do it without being divisive and creating more people who hate that and want to take more away from public lands. And really just, yeah, like give people the facts of what's going on, and then, yeah, sharing our passion about that as well. So
Well said. I think that's the basis of what we're doing right here. And like I say, I keep digressing because
no, there's a lot, and that's what
There's
our
so
work,
much going on.
there's
It's
a
like
lot to digress about.
there's a lot has happened in the last 3 months.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm glad you
But it's
you
tied together, the courts and what, like our checks and balances that are there, that are, people should know about those things as well, because they're going to impact, these decisions are also going to impact public land. So it's not so much a diversion, it's like this is another maybe scary thing that's going on that we should all be paying attention to, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was well said, Anitra. Uh, what we have is very unique in this world. I mean, for the public to own these large tracts of land, when you go to Europe and tour Europe and stuff, you don't find this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when people come from Europe and visit us, it's one of the things that stands out.
It
Is that you have all this land that you can go out and
mm-hmm.
breathe, and you can call it yours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've recreated on a lot of different private timber companies that have allowed hunting, and some of them are very good land managers and have allowed access for us to recreate on their property. But there's something to be said for going out, driving down some dirt BLM road, pulling off to the side, throwing out your tent, setting up camp, and looking around and saying, "This is mine."
Mm-hmm.
And that's so unique in this world to have that.
Yeah. Whenever
So
I travel out west and spend time on public lands, and I run into people from other countries, they are in awe of what we have. They're like, we don't have this there. They're taking a month off of their jobs in another country to go and rent a van in our country to drive around and see what we have. And like you said, what somebody who hasn't spent time on those public lands doesn't see, they're missing out on the great treasures of this world. Even like the desert holds an amazing amount of life. Being able to be in a place where you don't see any lights and you can see the dark sky and realize how many freaking stars we actually have, like how often you don't see that because of the world we live in. I mean, these are amazing things we have. And yeah,
it was interesting. I saw this during COVID, where a lot of the state parks and U.S. Forest Service campgrounds were shut down due to COVID situation. And it was amazing how people suddenly stumbled on, I can go out here on National Forest or BLM and I can dry camp
Mhm.
And then they realize, oh, this is what camping's really like. I don't have anybody right next to me. Almost to the point that a year after those restrictions were over, I was up in the McKenzie on National Forest looking for huckleberry areas to pick wild huckleberries. And I was going to spend the night. And you would have thought it was like deer season because every place that you could pull off and camp, there'd be an RV there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Because
Yeah.
people had stumbled on to that oh, this is what real camping. Granted, they have their RV, they're not sleeping in a tent,
Yeah.
but they're not in a state campground hooked up to electricity watching TV.
Mhm.
They're out there basically on their own,
Yeah.
and they discovered that because of those restrictions,
Mhm.
and now a lot of people are starting to realize that. So
Yeah, and we probably should wrap up so don't have the longest thing,
yeah,
and we have some stuff to talk about next time
Oh,
as
we'll
well.
have plenty. We'll
No,
have
I
plenty
know.
to talk about. Sadly, I guess, right?
What was I thinking?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Oh, I forgot, lost my train of thought.
you did mention the rallies the Sierra Club was having
Yeah,
on what's that?
go ahead.
The rallies that Sierra Club had planned and stuff. And that's something, I never saw myself as a sign carrier
Mhm.
protesting things, but I'm there now. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the thing that I would like to educate myself on, and hopefully others, that that's one way, where are these rallies at? And if they're accessible and I can get there, I'll start doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess
So,
when it comes down to it, I think, like you said, if with public lands, if you can get both sides behind it, which historically they've always been, and most people like really enjoy nature and wilderness, and if we can rally back around that, and I mean, really, I think about it, all it takes is enough people to write their senators like you did, Tim. And if their constituents are asking them, this is what we want, this is what we want, I mean, their jobs depend on doing what the majority of their constituents are asking for, right? So I feel like it is somewhat in our hands as the American public to start just writing those letters and bombarding here, this is what we demand, this is our public land, it's not your public land.
and
And
I
yeah,
think that's so very true, especially for people that have Republican representatives.
yep,
In my case, I'm kind of like preaching to the choir,
I know, I know, I did the same thing. I looked up my senators, I was like, oh, they're both
Yeah,
no, no.
but
Yeah.
but I have a lot of Republican friends that love
Mhm.
public lands.
Yeah.
And so they're probably right there with you. And again, people that have live in Republican districts
Mhm.
that have a Republican representative, if those representatives are hearing from enough people in
Yeah.
their constituents, then that can make a difference.
Yeah. So maybe
So,
next time we then talk about that too, because I know you've had some barriers with your Republican friends and family members of getting them behind this. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that and try to figure out, yeah, what's the type of message people need to hear to start taking action in that direction, right? Because you said your people would hate to lose public lands that they hunt and fish and recreate upon. So
yeah, I think it's just knowing that the threat is real,
yeah.
and some of it we're looking out ahead. We're seeing some signals of behind kind of various bills that have passed that have opened the door to that.
Mhm.
I hope we're raising a flag that doesn't need to be raised. I
Yeah.
hope that it's solid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But given what's happening in other areas, I don't feel you can't just sit back and say we'll have it forever. Nobody's going to challenge it.
Mhm.
So
And I think, yeah, and we don't have to end here, but what I was going to say before is, along with selling land around cities and urban areas for development, public lands, they also want to sell public lands around the national parks for development. And I do have some opinions about that because the national parks are huge, acres, and a lot of them have keystone large predatory species, and all you're doing is creating a world of headache, which then, but we can talk about that next time. But that
Yeah, that's a
was
that's
my
a really
thought.
good that's
Yeah.
a really good subject though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
and animals don't tend to know boundaries,
No, exactly. And so like that's, it's like, okay, I can maybe like we said, we want to be more moderate. Okay, if the BLM has an acre of land between like, or a half an acre in a housing development, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Like that's okay.
Yeah.
But around our park service lands and, like say taking away the actual, open spaces, like I'm not okay with that. And they do create, yeah, like you said, much more, much more areas for contention too, right? And we don't
Yeah.
need more of that.
Well,
It's not like we want our national parks to become like we're so developed that when we get to the gate of the national park, oh, this is the museum that we now enter. This is what the world used to be like. You
Uh-huh.
know,
Yeah.
you want to be able to live in
Yeah.
that world. So
well, here's the fallacy that now here's a fallacy that will be fed in that idea that if those lands can be sold or housing can be put there, that all these jobs are going to be created and there's going to be all this money that's going to be brought there. And okay, there will be jobs created, but what they do is they take into account the jobs of the construction. Once the construction's done, those jobs are so minimal. So they'll say, well, this will create, and this is on both sides, this is going to create 5,000 jobs. Well, 4,900 of those jobs are construction jobs for 6 months, and then it's gone. So the infrastructure and the money, it just doesn't equate for what's going to be there.
yeah.
It's
And are they primary housing or are they just secondary houses for people that want to go spend a couple weeks in
Mhm.
the wild, so to speak?
or
So
Airbnb again. It's
yeah,
about it
yeah,
comes down to that,
exactly.
the
Yeah.
dollar. Yeah, the
Yeah,
dollar.
that's a good subject to look at.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's wrap this up. Everybody, how about what's your final words of wisdom for this podcast? Or what do you want to, yeah, how do you want
I'll just say that I'm trying to educate myself on this as much as I can because we can't we can't lose our public lands. And that my hope is that anybody that watches this is curious enough to look into it and hopefully educate themselves on it. So
Very good. What about
that's
what you got?
Yes, I yeah,
Don't worry, I
don't.
can cut it if you don't
Yeah,
want to
no,
go.
no, no. I'm just there's so many thoughts going through my head, and that's I don't want that land to be raped and pillaged for a quick buck and to be left in where it can't be reconciled what has been done to it. Again, if it's done, it's the same thing with like Doge and what's going on with cuts in the federal government. Okay, there is definitely waste in the federal government, 100%, but it should be gone through with a fine tooth comb because there's all these little nuances with it. You just don't break a bunch of eggs to try to make an omelet. You're going to end up with an omelet that's got a bunch of eggshells in it. I mean, it
yeah.
just doesn't make any
Yeah,
it has
strategy and thoughtful movement forward would be appreciated.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
yes, so that's my thought, I guess.
thoughtful and intelligent movement forward would
Yeah,
be
I mean,
Yes.
there's ways
Yeah.
to do things that we can all get behind, and we need
yeah.
people that, yeah, that's what I'm hoping, yeah, we get to next. But yeah, I always love to borrow words from other people who write and think better than me. And I guess, yeah, this is one of the things I wrote in my journal recently was let's all stand for what we stand upon. So I guess yeah, we'll call that.
That's very fitting.
Yeah.
Very fitting.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah,
So-
I like it. I like it.
all right, Tim. Well, we
Hey.
can, yeah, we can also just, yeah, like
Yeah.
I'll end the podcast, but yeah, we can talk for a minute just to say goodbye.
Okay. Hey, it was good visiting with you guys again, catching up.
Yeah, it's technology has detriments and it's got good things.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
This was awesome. Yeah.